So, hi Helen, it's good to meet you.
Yeah, you too, Andrew.
Great. Well, we're on the call together today to talk about how young people are dealing with uncertainty at the moment, and maybe give young people some ideas and some different perspectives on how they might handle uncertainty. When we talk about young people, we're particularly talking about A-level students and those going to university and relatively early in their university careers, because there's such a lot of uncertainty around for people at the moment. And I think we both feel for that and wanted to have a conversation which we hope will be helpful if you're one of those people. So why don't you just say a little bit about who you are, Helen, and then I'll do the same.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Andrew. So my name's Helen Stanford. I'm actually a careers advisor at the local further education college here in Leamington. I am passionate about mental health and well-being, and I really believe that as far as young people are concerned, that knowing what they're going to do, what kind of path they're going to take, really helps them with their mental health overall. So that's kind of the kind of passion behind what I do. But I also am a mother of 3 children, and 2 of them are kind of in the bracket that we're going to be talking about today. I've got my son who's going back to university in August, September, going back into a second year, but a daughter who's going into her A-level year, so has some concerns and worries over, how the pandemic has affected her in terms of her, what she would describe lack of education over the last 3 months. So yeah, it'd be interesting to talk about.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, why don't I just say a little bit about me? So I'm Andrew Bridgewater. I'm a chartered psychologist these days, but I haven't always been. I've had a bit of an eclectic career. I started off as a trainee chartered accountant, then I went to IT, project management, organisational change. And in my mid-30s, I decided I wanted to retrain as a psychologist. So it's never too late. You don't have to get it right first time with your career. And I finally found what I love to do, but it's taken me a long time to do it. That was nearly 20 years ago. And I've actually spent a lot of time helping people use psychometric tests. So if you've ever gone for a job interview, or you may have seen some of these anyway, you're asked to complete personality and ability questionnaires. And I train people in how to use those. That's sort of part of my job. And the other part of my job, which I really enjoy, is being a mental health coach these days. And I've had my own kind of mental health story, which I've documented widely elsewhere, so it's not particularly secretive, but I had a lot of problems with stress about 15 years ago, and had always seemingly been at risk of being experiencing stress. And that particular episode, which was quite severe, made me realize that I didn't want to live the rest of my life like this. So through a combination of some simple lifestyle changes and also a different understanding about how the mind works, I've not only been able to deal with my own problems, but help a lot of other people with stress and potentially tipping into mental health problems. So I feel very blessed, really. And as I say, that's come out of my personal experience. So that's just a little bit about who I am. I've got a website at andrewbridgewater.com and also at thementalhealthcoach.net. Which is where my online courses are, if anybody wants to have a look, including a free one. So that's just a bit about me, and thanks for introducing yourself, Helen. So I just thought that we could start with a very broad question. In what ways do you see young people being impacted by uncertainty at the moment, particularly thinking about A-levels and early uni years?
I think probably if I start with the 2 separate groups, the first group are probably the ones who are thinking of going to university this year, who are probably not only anxious of starting a new kind of step in their lives and going to university, but also knowing what that's going to look like, just in terms of, there's highly unlikely to be any kind of freshers week. What's it going to look like, even down to the extent of moving in day? Is there going to be social distancing? What does that mean within their kitchen group? There's so many things that they will have gone to their kind of university open days, and it's all going to look very, very different. So there's that side of it, but also I think there might be a little bit of kind of imposter syndrome going on as well, because they haven't taken the exams. They haven't taken the exams to get to where they're going to be going. So I think there'll be a lot of anxiety also around, what grades they will actually be getting, and whether those kind of university offers will be there. So it's all that kind of uncertainty around what's going to happen, what will my grade be, will I get into the university of choice, and if I do, what will that look like as well, and what kind of experience am I going to have compared to what I thought I was going to experience.
Yeah, you painted that really nicely. I guess what we're saying is that the uncertainty levels, there's always uncertainty in life, but it seems that uncertainty, particularly for young people right now, has kind of exploded. And therefore we're going to have to learn something through this. We almost aren't going to be able to operate in the way that we have done before, because these are, this word unprecedented gets used a lot, but it's almost an unprecedented level of uncertainty, isn't it? And I think the first point I wanted to make is that we're always living in the unknown. It may not seem like it, but we are. And I think one of the areas where we get into trouble is where we have a relatively not fixed, but some strong sense of what the future is going to look like. And then maybe it either seems that it's not going to match up to that, or it doesn't end up matching to that. But I think that whether you realize it or not, you are always living in the unknown. And handling the unknown and the uncertainty that comes with it is going to be a core life skill, particularly at the moment. So I just wanted to kind of start with that point. So, for example, think about something that might have happened to you, Helen, in the past that didn't work out as you planned or expected. It doesn't have to be a particularly dramatic example, but is there something that kind of comes to mind with that?
I'm just trying to think.
Anything in relation to your own kind of education, qualifications?
Probably my A levels. I think I probably, in my views, many people may think that wow, what would she have to moan about on that score? But I was disappointed with one of the grades for my A levels. So yeah, it didn't quite turn out the way I expected.
Didn't quite pan out as you expected. Did you manage to get into the university of your choice?
I did actually in the end, but only because does that not work? That won't work as an example.
That's okay. No, the point is that you had a period of time, and I don't know how long that was. It might have been a few days. It might have been a couple of hours when you had a lot of thinking about that, I suspect. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly the point. In fact, I remember it very clearly. I was so nervous about coming home that my father had actually posted the results on the front door to say, these were your grades and have a think about it. And obviously my mind was going into overdrive thinking, well, I'm never going to get in now, and what am I going to do? And I don't really want my second choice, so I'm going to have to start again. And yeah, so there were a lot of thoughts like that. Yeah.
And see, that's a perfect example of a situation where you had an expectation, or hope, I suspect it was, of the way things were going to work out. Your initial realization was that expectation wasn't going to be fulfilled. And we have a load of thinking about that. And how did that thinking feel? Can you remember?
Very kind of panicky, really, and just like you say, your mind kind of goes into overdrive thinking of, and especially for me, because I'm a very kind of I like to solve problems. So I'll think so okay, so what are my options from this point of view? So I'll literally go into overdrive and think about, okay, so plan B was this, but if I don't want plan B, what will I need to do? And kind of I break it down into specific areas. That's just the way I am. I know many people who would just not be able to think because of that kind of feeling of anxiety and panic around, what was going on in their heads. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting? And I think that is a good example, because I think it illustrates how we live in the world of our thinking moment to moment. So you had a piece of information, which was that you hadn't achieved quite the grades on one subject. That thinking, that piece of information, that extraneous event led to some thinking on your part. Now, the funny thing is that we have no idea how life is going to turn out. And yet the first reaction is, oh my goodness, I'm not going to get into the university of my choice.
Yeah.
And we start to try and problem solve in our heads around that scenario building and this, that, and the other, don't we?
That's right. Well, here's the interesting thing, though, Andrew, on that story. It had nothing to do with the course that I was studying at that university. The reason I wanted to go to that university, because it was near my boyfriend. Now, I
Okay.
knew that, at the time I thought that was going to pan out. It really didn't. It lasted 6 months after that. So it's crazy but at that time, though, that was everything to me, that we were not going to be, separated, which, for some young people that will be, a consideration when they're thinking about it.
So it was magnified even more in that sense.
Yeah.
So, and how long did this period of uncertainty go on for?
I think it was only a couple of days, because what we decided to so I wanted to take control of it, and my father was saying, well, just call up the university and find out for sure, because we were living abroad at the time, so we didn't have the same system that we have now, whereby we would find out straight away. So eventually I contacted the university, and they said, yeah, don't worry about it, it's fine. Yeah, you've got in, even though you just got 1 grade lower than you needed. So just with 1 phone call, I was able to kind of change that whole way of thinking. And
suddenly the world was okay again.
Absolutely, completely normal again.
Isn't that funny?
Exactly.
Isn't that interesting? So you had 2 days of probably quite overthinking, unhelpful thinking, we might describe it as, but it did lead you to solve the problem, and actually it solved itself reasonably easily. But I think it's a great example of how we're consistently living in the feeling of our thinking, not our circumstances. Now, it looks like that circumstance caused your feelings, but actually this understanding that I want to begin to share with people would say that's never the case. Your feelings are only ever coming from your moment-to-moment thinking. But the illusion is, the outside-in illusion, we call it, is that it appears that that external circumstance is causing your feelings. Now, that might sound like a bit of a play on words and splitting hairs. Right. I mean, there's an interesting line in Shakespeare's Hamlet, and I only know it because I've used it many times. Act 2, Scene 2. There's nothing good or bad, only thinking makes it so. Now, Shakespeare was quite ahead of his time as a philosopher and a psychologist, as well as a playwright in many ways. And I went to Shakespeare School in Stratford, so I was surrounded by it for years. But the point I'm trying to make here is that we live in a world of our thinking, and it's much closer to virtual reality than anything else. So let me give you an example, a simple metaphor of that. A couple of years ago, I went to the Festival of Speed in Goodwood. I don't know if you've either heard of it or ever been.
I have. I work with a lot of engineers, and that's their passion, and motorsports students.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Well, it's a petrol head's paradise, and I quite like fast cars from time to time. So I went along to the Festival of Speed, and one of the exhibits they had was a Back to the Future tent. And inside the Back to the Future tent was a virtual reality roller coaster. And not sure if you've ever seen anything like it or experienced anything like it, but I watched these people having experience while I was in the queue. So they had the goggles on, they had full ear defenders, they had the seats were moving around slightly, and they were having what looked to be a very compelling experience because they were screaming and shouting and feeling very, very involved in it. And I thought, this will be interesting. When I go on, I'm going to throw myself into the virtual reality and experience that. But I'm also going to rest in the truth that I'm safely strapped into a seat in a tent at the Festival of Speed. Now, that's what I did. So I went on, the first dip, whoa, this is scary. And then at that moment, I thought, no, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. I'm here in the tent. Now, this is what's going on with us in our lives. We're living in this virtual reality, which seems utterly compelling because it's our version of reality, but it's inevitably different to other people's. And this is one of the reasons why we find it hard sometimes to see into each other's worlds, or we find it hard to understand why somebody has reacted to a situation in one way, somebody else reacts in a completely different way. This virtual reality of our own creation through our thinking is what we're living in all the time. Now, that will probably seem really a bit strange to people, but it's been incredibly helpful for me as someone who suffered with severe stress at regular intervals in life until I came across this understanding. Because when you do come across this understanding, when you know that that you are actually perfectly safe. The only thing that's stopping you being safe is your own thinking.
Yeah.
And once you appreciate the mechanics of the mind and how that thinking is creating those feelings moment to moment and how that looks very real, then you can begin to be less concerned about it. Now, actually, fear is a very useful thing, isn't it? There are times when it's really useful to be fearful. Don't jump off a tall building because gravity will have you.
Yeah.
But the point is that knowing the difference between useful fear and unhelpful fear is absolutely crucial. And as I say, once you understand a bit more about the mechanics of the mind and how the mind works to create your experience moment to moment for your thinking, you begin to get better at establishing when fear is genuinely useful and when it's just having you for a ride.
Yeah. So are there certain things that you'll say to you now that you're very good at this way of thinking? Are there certain things that you'll say to yourself when you feel your thoughts almost kind of running away with you? Is there like a set thing that you'll say, Andrew, come on now?
It's interesting you say that. And I used to, I would have said that myself a few years ago, because what we try to do, as soon as we get exposed to this, and I was exposed to this first in 2013, to be honest, I didn't get it. I didn't get it for 2 or 3 years because I was trying to fit it with everything else I understood or had learned about the human mind. So things like neuro-linguistic programming, cognitive behavioral therapy, visualization, affirmations, the sort of things that you just described, right? What's my trigger point here? How am I going to anchor myself differently? All of this stuff didn't really get me anywhere. What helps is that deep knowing that you're creating that experience. Now, it doesn't mean to say that life won't have its ups and downs. It very much does. The difference from my perspective is I've spent much less time in the downs because I'm realizing what's going on. So instead of being hooked by my experience and my feelings and that anxiety, that racing heart, those palpitations, the aches and pains, the sense that actually I'm out of control here, am I having a panic attack? That in itself can be very, very fear-inducing. But when you realize how it's being created, you can begin to drop out of it naturally. Now, it isn't an overnight sensation. It's not something that will happen to people immediately. But what I'm encouraging everybody who's listening to this to do is to look into the 3 principles understanding of Sydney Banks and just experience it a little bit and see what sort of an impact it can have for you. And I think what I would say is that don't try to understand it intellectually, because we had a little conversation about this, didn't we, a week or so ago. And you came back to me with a really interesting email, which was great. And it was everything I would have said a few years ago. Am I on the right track? Have I got it?
I know. You just want to try and really understand it through, like you've just said, through everything that you've learned, for me, through my, human given psychotherapy training. That is the way I was trying to see it as, we have these innate resources, and that is what you might describe as the kind of intelligent kind of power, but that behind everything, and with that, it's something that we should probably trust in more, and relax more about, that we will find a way through kind of these uncertain times just by almost not letting our thoughts get away with us. But again, I watched another thing that you sent me kindly, where the guy, and I forgive me, I forget his name, but he was saying, just relax about it, just stop thinking about it. So take on board what I'm saying, but then just stop thinking. This is the easiest part of it. You don't have to think about it, and hopefully it will suddenly just come to you as an insight. So I'm kind of at that point where I'm just kind of waiting for the insight to come.
Okay, that's okay. And I think, what people typically say is, give me the technique to get an insight. So that's really sort of going back upstream. What we're trying to do is understand how we're creating our experience to the extent to which it doesn't frighten us, because we get into trouble when we believe our own negative thinking. And when we believe our own negative thinking and it creates feelings which we don't like and are frightened by, it reinforces the whole process. So we're in a vicious circle. And the more you begin to see this, the better you will be at just settling down naturally, because the mind has a wonderful self-correction mechanism. And again, a great metaphor I heard about this is a trainer aeroplane. There is a type of trainer aeroplane. I'll give you the story. There was a guy up in this aeroplane, and he was only in his second or third flying lesson, and he lost control. And basically, the thing was spiraling to the ground. Now, amazingly enough, he didn't have a co-pilot with him. They were talking to him on the tower, and he said, "Mayday, mayday! I'm out of control. What do I do? Which way do I push the stick?" And the guy on the control tower says, "Take your hands and feet off the controls. Repeat, take your hands and feet off the controls." The guy says, no, you don't understand. I'm in a tailspin. What the guy in the control tower knew was that the plane had a self-righting mechanism. Take your hands and feet off the controls, the plane will level out and pick itself up naturally. When you fight the stick and you fight everything in the cockpit, it will keep doing that. Now, this is what we do in life.
Okay.
We don't take our hands and feet off the controls in our attempts to fix the situation. We overthink it. We create more thinking, more feelings, more anxiety. Whereas actually, when we realize what we're doing and all we need to do is take our hands and feet off the controls, the mind will self-regulate. It will settle itself down. Have you noticed how toddlers can do this?
Yeah. Thinking about it, yeah.
Isn't it interesting? So we're born with this ability to settle down naturally. And when I say toddlers, probably up to 18 months, 2 years, and then we kind of learn the wrong strategies. But we're born innately mentally healthy with this ability to settle down naturally. So when a young child is not hungry, not thirsty, not in pain, it's quite happy. Doesn't need to worry about who did what to who and who said what to somebody else last week and whether or not they're going to pass the next exam. It's just happy. Now we may say, well, it's got every reason to be. It's not to worry about. It's got people looking after it 24/7. Blah blah blah. But the point is that we are born with this ability to quieten our minds naturally. And would you believe it that meditation is actually our natural state? We tend to think about meditation as something you do in a Buddhist monastery with your legs crossed high in the Himalayas. It's not. It's not. It's something that we all have access to when our minds are quiet. So if you noticed, if you go for a walk in the woods on a lovely day, or you're suddenly inspired by nature, we sort of quieten down, don't we?
Yeah, no, I try and do that every day, actually, because that's one time when I do find that I have my best ideas, where I can just be walking, and that's when I will get my insights, because I guess because I'm literally not thinking about anything in particular, and the odd thing will pop up. So I think that's what you're talking about.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. We tend to get our best ideas and insights when our mind isn't busy. So when we're out in nature, when we're on holiday, when we're doing something where we haven't got a head full of thinking, and we get into trouble with a head full of unhelpful thinking. And that's, looking back on it, every time in my life I've struggled psychologically with stress, with mental health problems, it was that. And in fact, there's a well-known psychiatrist who works with the three principles, who basically says that all mental health problems come down to one thing. There's one cause. It's called chronic mental stress. And chronic mental stress is another phrase for overthinking.
Yeah.
Now, sounds really simple, but it's we all do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the problem with young people is that they are constantly distracted. I try and encourage my children to go out and they do, actually, to be fair, do exercise, but very rarely will they go out and have a walk around the block for the sake of just being on a nice walk in the nature, out in nature. So I think that's a problem as well, that a lot of young people don't give themselves that time unless they're very much more in touch with these kind of ideas, to meditate, to practice mindfulness, to literally go out for a walk. I mean, they just don't do it. Certainly not the students I work with. It's just, if I said that to them, they'd be like, what are you talking about? So they've almost not reached that level, I guess, of maturity and understanding of what works to really help.
Well, I think we don't know, do we? And I can remember being at that stage in my life myself, and often just ending up confused by the experience. The point is that we live in a world that thinks that the outside creates our life experience. So we call it the outside-in illusion. Actually, it's inside out. everything we're experiencing in life is coming from within us. And that's a fundamental reappraisal. And I think particularly at the moment, it's incredibly helpful, because I think some enormous fear around the coronavirus, what it's going to impact, how it's going to affect economically, how it's going to affect people's education, so much. And the sense is that it's coming from the virus, it's coming from the government, it's coming from X, Y, Z who are doing this. It's not. It's actually that experience is internally generated. And deeply understanding that has been profound for me, because it's enabled me to know for sure that mental health challenges won't return. And that's in the face of everything I was ever told. I was always told that I would be vulnerable because I was just one of those people. Which is a really unhelpful prognosis, actually, because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You think, well, there isn't anything I can do. But in the absence of any real help for this, all I was being offered were drugs. I had to go and find my own answers. And some of it was lifestyle. So great, the sort of things that you're talking about, techniques and approaches to quieting the mind. But also what we eat has a massive impact on our mental health, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
So things like omega-3, fatty acids from oily fish, you can take a fish oil supplement. It's really important to feed the brain the right fats. And again, as students, very often we think, oh, it doesn't matter what I eat. But actually, if you want to be on performance for exams, particularly things like that, it's absolutely crucial, really important to feed yourself the right fats and to know what's creating your mental health. Because I think one of the problems we live in a world that's often preoccupied with treating illness rather than creating wellness. And I think it's a very different paradigm.
No, definitely. I just wish within education there were more kind of sessions around overall well-being. I think they are, and they're starting to look at it more, aren't they? But I just think but even if we tell, this is I think the problem that we have, even if we can tell young people to, eat the dark green vegetables, eat the fish oils, have the supplements, or whatever it might be, it's unlikely when they go to university they'll be able to afford all this amazing fresh organic food that's going to benefit them, but also it's just not a priority for them necessarily. So it's just,
and I get that, and I totally understand it. It certainly wasn't for me. So just coming back to the psychology for a minute, just to reinforce the points that we're making. The mind only works one way. It works from the inside out, not from the outside in. Now, somebody listening to that might think, well, what on earth are you talking about? As I say, it's about this experience that we have that is internally generated. It's not coming directly from the circumstances and situations of our lives. The other thing is that we're designed for success mentally. Now, I think that's really good news. As I said, we're born innately mentally healthy. So if you're feeling stressed right now and you think there's something wrong with you, those feelings are coming from within. They're created by your own overthinking, some of it unhelpful. There's nothing wrong with you psychologically. And I think this is where a lot of the mainstream can be unhelpful. We're suddenly given a label. When I was given the label clinically depressed, it's amazing how much worse I felt.
I can imagine,
because suddenly I had a reason to feel really lousy. Not only was the circumstance and situation that I felt was making me depressed still there, but I was now told I was clinically depressed. Wow. And I think we just need to be aware of that. We need to talk about things like low mood rather than depression and anxiety sometimes, because we all have low moods, and that's okay. It's okay not to be okay. You might have heard this phrase. It's been used a lot. And I think particularly at the moment, there's a lot not to be okay about if you think about it too hard, and that's all right. This isn't going to last forever. And I suppose the other thing I want to say, the more deeply you understand this, the more that you appreciate that life really has your back. It truly does. I don't believe any creative force in this universe would have set this up as a cosmic joke. We are not designed to be mentally unhealthy. We learn the wrong strategies, and I certainly did. And unfortunately, nothing in mainstream psychology really helped until I came across this understanding of the 3 principles, which, as I say, I would urge people to have a look at a bit more, if anything that we've said has piqued your curiosity.
Yeah. I just say one thing on top of what you were saying, because you touched on something that's I feel is really important, is that a lot of, we're listening to it on the news and everything, and people are talking about anxiety and we're all going to have this, young people are going to struggle with their mental health going forward. However, I think we need to be really careful about the difference between, because I've had students say, oh, I'm suffering from anxiety. And actually, when you really kind of knuckle down and understand what's going on, they were just worried. So understanding the difference between the meaning of anxiety, worry, fear, stress, and how actually they're quite different in terms of what they actually mean. And it's okay to be worried. I mean, these are students starting, a new college after they've just left their old school. They finish GCSEs, they come to the college, and then suddenly they develop anxiety. They haven't got anxiety, they're just worried. And it's about kind of understanding that what worry is and what they can do to kind of help themselves with worry. They haven't suddenly got anxiety and are heading for, depression or anything else like that.
Yeah.
So
I think you make a really good point, Helen. I think one of the problems with the awareness raising that's gone on is that people are much more familiar with these concepts and these terms now. And there's a sense that, oh my God, almost like you can catch it. Anxiety can be a very temporary state, or it can be an enduring characteristic. And we've all experienced anxiety. Somebody jumps out into the road in front of you, you jam the brakes on and you'll feel anxious instantly. It's the way we're wired. And it's just worth reflecting on the biology of this a little bit. These hormones that are released, cortisol and adrenaline, were designed to help us fight or flee from a predator. They're not terribly helpful when they crop up 3 or 4 times a day, or even more often. So we're designed to have that hormone mechanism impacted once a fortnight. And we're living in a society where it's being triggered daily and many times a day for people. And they're getting symptoms, the sorts of things that you were just describing. And suddenly those symptoms feed the anxiety, because we think, oh my God, I'm having a panic attack. Somebody told me about this. They'd had one of them after the exams, and suddenly I'm having one too. Now, we just need to, there's something I would share with people, which is about acknowledging our feelings and not being frightened by them.
Yeah.
Because they're just our feelings. They're not the truth. And when we learn to be less afraid of our experience, the world really does change. And I think that I feel very blessed to have had insights around this, because I felt trapped. I felt that my life was going to be a repeating pattern of depression and anxiety when life circumstances got tough. And that's a really miserable way to live your life. It doesn't have to be like that. And I think that's what we're pointing to here. And I think you've given us some great examples. Is there anything else you would like to add to the conversation, Helen?
No, I don't. I think we've covered quite a lot. I mean, we could talk probably for hours about this topic, because I think we both really love it and we're really interested in it. But I think for the sake of this conversation.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much. And as I say, if people want to find out more about what I'm doing, it's andrewbridgewater.com or thementalhealthcoach.net. And at thementalhealthcoach.net, I've actually got a free audio course on dealing with anxiety, which people might find particularly useful at the moment. So thanks very much, Helen.
I'm actually going to look at it. Actually, I've spied on that already, and it's fantastic. It's a really, really useful course. So brilliant. Definitely should go and look that up. Yeah.
Lovely. Great to talk to you. Thanks, Helen.
Yeah, thank you. You too. Bye, Andrew.
Bye.